Talk WMS. Hi, everybody. I'm Bob Bowman, Editor-in-Chief of SupplyChainBrain. Welcome to this presentation highlighting the 2025 Gartner Magic Quadrant findings and market analysis for warehouse management systems, presented by Made4Net. Quick reminder, there will be an audience question and answer session at the end of this presentation. Audience members are encouraged to submit their questions at any time during the presentation by clicking on that Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. So Gartner has long been recognized as a leading expert in the supply chain technology marketplace. Today, we're going to discuss two recently published Gartner reports: the Magic Quadrant for Warehouse Management Systems and the companion report, the Critical Capabilities for Warehouse Management Systems. Analyzing the data in both reports is important for WMS buyers because together you get a more complete picture. The Magic Quadrant highlights the vendors, whereas the Critical Capabilities report provides a deep dive into the actual capabilities of the WMS solutions across a range of warehouse complexities. So Gartner published the 2025 Gartner Magic Quadrant for Warehouse Management Systems on May 2nd. It evaluated more than 80 WMS providers, but only 17 met the documented inclusion criteria and were ultimately recognized. 3 providers were dropped from last year, and no new vendors have been added. So a few things stand out. Let's run through them. Today's WMS buyers are looking for solutions that can do much more than manage inventory and fulfill orders. As labor shortages persist, organizations are also turning to automation to fill the gaps and need WMS solutions that can seamlessly integrate with a wide range of automation technologies. Buyers are placing greater emphasis on usability, adaptability, and flexibility to ensure systems can evolve with business needs. And finally, many of the vendors are continuing to build out new use cases for various forms of AI, or artificial intelligence, notably, most recently, generative AI, Gen AI, and Vision AI. So with that, I want to introduce our speakers for today. Greg Utter is Senior Managing Director with Alpine Supply Chain Solutions. Greg has more than 30 years of experience driving value through innovative warehouse and fulfillment solutions. He has deep expertise in WMS, labor management, supply chain planning, and analytics, with a proven track record of delivering results for Fortune 500 companies across diverse industries. Howard Turner is Director of Supply Chain Systems at St. Onge. He has more than 25 years of experience designing, optimizing, and implementing warehouse and distribution solutions for leading global brands. At St. Onge, Howard leads complex supply chain execution system software selection and implementation projects. And Amit Levy is Executive Vice President of Sales and Strategy at Made4Net, a global leader in supply chain execution and warehouse management systems. With over 20 years of experience in logistics technology, Amit offers deep insights into evolving fulfillment models, automation, and data-driven decision-making. Welcome, all of you. Great to have you all here. Thank you very much for being here. Welcome, audience, as well. With that, I'd like to begin the panel discussion portion of this presentation by posing a number of questions to our distinguished panel, starting with this one. So Gartner points out that there is near functional parity for basic core WMS functions among the WMS funders vendors. What should WMS buyers be paying attention to in their evaluation process? Greg, let me start with you.
Well, thanks. Yeah, if you wanted to look at the top right, for instance, of the Gartner Magic Quadrant, I would say that all those vendors can do all the basic blocking and tackling. What you really want to look for when you're evaluating it is defining what your company's unique requirements are. Every company has a half a dozen or more very unique requirements to make sure that their business runs the way it should be. So identify those up front and then pose those unique requirements to the vendors during your selection process.
Howard, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, Greg has it right, and Gartner too. I mean, they're right on point with that. WMS market is mature. There is parity in terms of functionality. What we're seeing now when we talk to clients, really some of the key differentiators are things like IT strategy, right? The technical architecture, right? A lot of these systems are SaaS systems. So what does that SaaS deployment look like? How do they approach it? How do they support it? And you'll be surprised, things like culture fit, right, which is more of a soft factor, can be a differentiator when determining which system to select, as well as things like pricing structure, right? How easy it is to train, use, and how well thought out the implementation plan is.
SaaS, supply chain as a service. Thank you for that. Okay, so as a companion report to the Magic Quadrant, well, let me ask you this first, actually. Volatility in the supply chain marketplace is a given for the foreseeable future. How does the right WMS provide the flexibility to adapt as needs change? Howard?
Yeah, I mean, so the WMS is really like a core foundational, system, right? And we think about a supply chain as broader than just the distribution center, right? It goes outside of the four walls. It has to do with your vendors, your suppliers, your customers. Has to do with data coming from a lot of different systems within your organization, a lot of ERP systems. But that the WMS is really at the heart of it. So I think in terms of visibility, in terms of providing, data upstream and to systems that collect this data, that can coordinate that with other systems to give you that real view of how your supply chain is performing and critical items that need to be addressed, right? So if it's understanding availability of inventory, capacity of a facility, these are all things that you can leverage from the WMS and change, modify as needed, right? As your needs change. So it's just a critical cog in that whole supply chain machine.
Greg, we're talking flexibility. What's your take?
Yeah, so I would say think with the future in mind. What you're doing today is likely going to change in the future, as you mentioned. For instance, you may not be doing anything with regards to cross dock or flow through or lot control. Governance changes, supply chain changes. So when you're building that initial draft of your requirements, your RFP, however you want to put it together, keep in mind that future state and make sure that whatever vendor that you're going to go with has the capability to make that work in that future state design.
Absolutely essential. Okay. So, as a companion report to the Magic Quadrant, the Critical Capabilities for Warehouse Management Systems report provides a deeper dive into the key capabilities that companies should pay attention to when evaluating warehouse management systems. Here's what the report says. I'm quoting now. Our assessment is based on 11 key differentiating product capabilities evaluated across 5 major use cases of warehouse and distribution center operational needs based on warehouse complexity, end quote. Now, in the report, each WMS solution is evaluated across these 11 critical capabilities. You're seeing them right here on the screen. And WMS solutions are then evaluated based on warehouse use cases, also known as warehouse complexity. So let's unpack a few of these capabilities that we're looking at today. Can you pick 2 capabilities and explain how you recommend that customers evaluate these in a WMS analysis? Greg.
Golly, that's a long list. I've got more than 2, but I'll just pick on the 2 key ones in my mind. The first one is integration, and I know most people on this call have heard the term, it's the long pole in the tent, and it is. So think ahead on your integration technologies. Understand whether you've got an integration tool that's going to be leveraged as you grow into the supply chain market. Make sure that it's compatible with material handling, robotics, whatever your future state looks like. That would be number 1. Number 2 would be usability. I like to use the term follow the bouncing ball. So envision your workers out on the distribution center. And I'd like to say when you're doing your design, count the clicks, count the scans to make sure that you're not spending too much time getting from point A to point Z. So spend the time to make sure that it's configured correctly and you're not clicking too much and you're not scanning too much.
Howard,
Yeah.
pick 2 for us, would you?
Pick two. Okay. Well, I hate to give you the consultant answer, but it depends, right? And that's the truth. I mean, if you're talking about, a facility that's deploying like some type of goods to person solution, right? It's heavy into e-com or something like, then material handling integration is going to be a critical capability. But I know you're forcing me to pick two. So the two, I'm going to pick are, functionality, core functionality, I believe was up there. Can't overstate that. We like to guide our clients through a process of listing out their functionality and identifying what's critical, what's, business critical, what's must have versus what's nice to have. So it's really just going back and making sure as you're defining those, as Greg stated perfectly, those future state requirements, you're making sure, right, this system you're evaluating on how well it can hit those critical pieces, things that are core, to your business. So that'll be one. I think another one that's can be sometime overlooked, especially, because this ties into change management. It's just ease of use, right? Is the system intuitive, right? Do I need to sit and memorize a whole set of very specific functions, or is it something that I can pick up and learn, and grasp similar to the way you can pick up an iPhone, right? And immediately understand the interface and how to use it. So I think that's important when it comes to training, when it comes to onboarding, when it comes to effectiveness of the solution. It's just, that ease of use, I think, is a critical capability as well.
Over to you, Amit. Two capabilities.
Yeah, you're making this hard because I'm going to choose
Sorry.
one of the two is going to be just echoing what Greg and Howard said, and that is simplicity and usability. In my opinion, customers are, and this is experience that I see with most of our customers. They're looking for simplicity, ease of use within the operation when they use the system, right? This pertains to, like Greg said, fewer clicks, easy navigation, minimizing data entry into the system. That all leads into a time to value. Remember, people on the floor, all they want to do is be efficient, get those orders out. So ease of use is key. The second one is a little bit different from what my colleagues said, and that is adaptability and scalability. I think the ability to pivot quickly is no longer an option. That's mandatory. Whether it's responding to new customers' requirements, onboarding automation, simply just using labor constraints. Customers want a WMS that can be flexible. Systems that are built today on adaptability platforms, with low-code configuration tools, which is something that's becoming more often, templated workflows, allow customers who basically use those systems to make changes without waiting too long for developing, without being dependent on the vendor. This is especially important in today's dynamic supply chain landscape. I think that all, again, leads back to faster time and lower cost to value. So those would be my two picks.
Okay, but let's stick on this subject of flexibility and agility, and particularly configurability. Now, the constant change in the supply chain, with all this happening, we do recognize the importance of being able to pivot to changing needs quickly, and you guys are making that point really well today. But can we talk more about how this configurability of systems pertains to these critical capabilities? Amit, maybe you could just expand on that just a little more.
Sure, I think that's a really great point, right? Especially in today's environment, you need speed, flexibility, scalability. That's everything. When customers evaluate implementation and integration tools, they really look for how to use these capabilities to, again, I repeat myself, reduce time to value and long-term total cost of ownership, because that's really what matters when you put in a system like this. So my first point would be speed and simplicity of the implementation. Implementation tools such as configuration wizards, packaged workflows, pre-built integration templates, those are pretty critical. They allow customers to get up and running faster, especially in a multi-site rollout. This is particularly important when businesses that can't afford long ramp-up times and operational disruptions. Gartner's called out that the implementation have historically been time-consuming and expensive. So, embedded tools that are streamlining these processes are a major differentiator for vendors. The second one is flexibility that pertains to integration. Customers increasingly operate in a hybrid environment with multiple automation vendors, ERP systems, e-commerce platform, and any third-party application. Those are systems that the WMS needs to connect to, right? To integrate to. So connector-based integration capabilities that are supported by APIs is a true value in those instances, as well as health check tools that basically allow them to plug in those system into their ecosystem within the organization without building custom development.
Right.
The third one that I would address is ongoing support and upgradability. This is not just about initial go live. We're talking about customers that live with those systems for many years to come. So customers need to measure the value of how easy it is to maintain those upgrades and of the system along the year, right, in the long term. Tools that support version control, configuration, rollouts of multiple sites in the future, and obviously testing. These are all valuable assets that help customers in the long run. I think just to summarize, and I know this was a long answer, ultimately customers see implementation and integration tools not just as a technical feature, but as a strategic enabler.
Okay.
They're what allows the benefit and the overall ROI.
Okay, well, let's hear from Greg on this issue of configurability. What more do you have to say about that to us, Greg?
Sure. So very common. The good news is it's highly configurable. The bad news is it's highly configurable. So you have to really keep an eye on what the real unique requirements are for your business, and it will change from business to business. So just keep that in mind. Stay laser focused on what is going to make your business run. And then I'd like to talk about the 3 W's: WMS, WES, and WCS. And I'm seeing the convergence of those 3 acronyms into one toolbox from a lot of vendors. So be very clear on what your current state looks like and what your future state looks like, and the need for either one of the 3 W's if it exists within one solution, or if you have to go out to different providers in order to meet the needs of your current supply chain and your future supply chain.
Warehouse execution system, WES, warehouse control system, WCS. Thank you for that. And isn't it interesting how, to an outsider in this world, every warehouse looks the same? How little they know about the need for the individual capabilities of each facility. Okay, so in the critical capabilities report, Gartner evaluates the key capabilities across 5 major use cases based on warehouse complexity. Let's go through these 5 levels really quickly. Level 1, very basic WMS and inventory management functions. Level 2 is basic WMS with multi-location inventory storage for simple operations, getting more complicated now. Level 3, more complex, requiring capabilities that intelligently and automatically direct work with a focus on improving physical warehouse execution processes. Level 4, the emphasis shifts to automating, improving, and enhancing processes by adding value-added or so-called extended decision support capabilities. And finally, level 5, whereas the previous levels focused on primarily people-driven processes, level 5 shifts to extensive use of material handling automation systems. Okay, so with that in mind, it sounds like Gartner's telling people to evaluate WMS solutions not just by feature, but by fit to the business and operations. Again, we just keep harping on this and the importance of this. How do WMS buyers use this information to align WMS solutions with their business goals? Amit?
Yeah, that is a key takeaway from this year's critical capabilities report. Gartner is clearly signaling, Bob, that WMS buyers should move beyond feature checklist and instead focus on how well the solution fits their business model, right? Operational complexity and future growth. From what I see, buyers are increasingly using Gartner's model, level 1 through level 5, which you just presented, as somewhat of a lens to evaluate a fit. They're asking, does this WMS support my current needs, and can it scale with me so I can grow on my business, but also automate some of the processes. What's powerful about the critical capabilities framework is that it helps buyers map their priorities to the right capabilities. So as an example, level 2 or level 3 operation might prioritize adaptability and usability, looking for a system that's easy to configure, quickly to deploy. But then on the flip side, level 4 or 5 operation with high automation and multi-site orchestration, will focus more on integration to robotics support and advanced analytics. So, most of the vendors today cover the basic features of core WMS, and some of them even cover advanced and extended features, right? I think most of them do. Ultimately, it's about the strategic alignment. The best WMS isn't the one that has the most feature. It's the one that helps you execute the strategy with confidence. That's how I would look at it.
Yeah.
Howard, aligning with business goals. Talk about that.
Yeah. I think I'm still seeing, what you guys have touched upon, when we deal with our clients. I think, in my opinion, at least, buyers still predominantly view this information, the Gartner reports and Magic Quadrant reports as a ranking. And we do counsel, right, that really to view it as a fit to business, requirements, operational needs, rather than a ranking. So it's not just whoever's in the, top right-hand quadrant is automatically the best WMS, right? I think that's the wrong way to look at it. All these vendors that are on that list, all these systems that are on the list are, some of the best out there and capable. And I think there's a use case, for each of them. And it's just evaluating, right, the system against, your needs, some of those soft factors I talked about previously, right? And using that to determine, what you need. You can look at a level 3 system, which covers, right, the way Gartner defines a level 3 system, right? All of your, warehouse, operational needs, as you mentioned, managing labor as opposed to managing systems. Well, that may be the perfect fit for an organization. And they may have systems they've just invested to support other areas, outside of that, kind of, core WMS space, like a transportation management system, or maybe they have a limited amount of automation and just invested in a control system. So, they may not even need some of the capabilities that you see in a level 4 and 5 system. So it's not just because, these systems check the boxes, it automatically, this is the one that should go into your operation. I think it's more of a comprehensive view of what you need versus what the systems offer, and using that to make your determination, as opposed to looking at this report as just a ranking.
Okay, well, let's take a closer look at warehouse complexity. Now, I think a lot of people would automatically equate size of the warehouse to overall warehouse complexity. But we can see in this diagram that warehouse size is just one of 10 components in determining your overall complexity. Gartner, of course, does a nice job of categorizing warehouses by complexity and matching that to the capabilities in a WMS that they should prioritize. But do customers truly understand their own warehouse complexity? Amit?
No, I think they don't. So, no disrespect to Gartner. I think the whole definition of level 1 through level 5 is just a bit confusing. Because to your point, Bob, a lot of customers just don't really understand, what it means. They don't go into the details. They don't read those specific description or clarification on what the complexity level is, and then they interpret it based on the size of their warehouse. In other words, if it's a level 1, then that means I have a small warehouse, and if it's a level 5, then it means that I have a huge warehouse. That's not the case. The misalignment really happens because warehouse complexity is just not about size or SKU count. It's about things like, process variability, order mix, labor dynamics, and sometimes even the degree of automation, which takes us to the, higher level of complexity. So I think this is an area where consultants and experts like, Greg and Howard, are there to educate and coach these customers and make them understand what the complexity level basically means. Most of the customers that we see in the WMS as WMS vendors typically fall somewhere between the L2, the level 2 to the level 4. I think the majority of the warehouses out there that we see are there. It's really an exception where those 1 and 5 are in the market, but they exist. The complexity level is super important because you're choosing the vendor that best fits to your needs based on that complexity. And that's kind of what Gartner is trying to do here. So, they're taking the matrix of those capabilities and what we saw before of those 11 capabilities that you presented on the screen. They look at the complexity level and they see, where do they fit. They don't always have the ability to understand and analyze the level of complexity of the warehouse. And as a result, customers choose the wrong WMS. To summarize again, I believe that talking to experts that are in this space and have the experience can coach them, can guide them to the right solutions, that's the right approach.
Greg, do you agree that customers don't really have a complete grasp on this dynamic?
Yep, I agree. And we see it all the time. And I think customers will look at the Gartner Magic Quadrant and just assume that if it lives in the top right, it's a good fit for them. When in fact it may be a good fit, but they could go with somebody that is not in that top right, maybe at a cost savings that meets or exceeds their current and future requirements. And then keep in mind also, as that level of complexity gets higher, we'll just call it a level 5, and material handling equipment is part of your infrastructure that's making a lot of decisions, less reliant on the WMS and more reliant on the WCS, the warehouse control systems. So just keeping those things in mind as that complexity arises. And again, size doesn't matter. I was in a 1.5 million square foot distribution center a few weeks ago, and it was a pallets in, pallets out. A month ago, I was in a 50,000 square foot pharmaceutical facility, highly complex, meaning they had a lot of material handling. They have to capture all these different lot control numbers to meet FDA requirements. So size doesn't matter. Most don't understand the 1 through 5. It's up to us as a consultant in the back of a rafting guide, telling them when to paddle right, when to paddle left, so they make it through the rapids unscathed. Pick the right one for the business.
Thanks for driving that point home. Interesting to note, though, that Made4Net's Warehouse Expert is the only WMS to maintain a score above 3.0 across all 5 warehouse use cases. So why is consistent performance across varied environments such a strong selling point in today's market? Amit?
Yeah, Bob, it's a good point. So, first of all, I think, WMS is a strategic and pretty big investment, right? For any organization that the distribution is the core and the heart of their business. So selecting a WMS or buying a WMS is not like buying a car every few years and then looking to change it to a new model. Customers want a solution that will be there for the long run. My experience is that it's a minimum of 10 or more years of a runway, and you want a solution that can grow with you. You want a solution that can adapt to your ever-changing operations. So that is why this is a great observation, and it really gets down to the heart of what makes Made4Net a system stand out. Being the only WMS to maintain a score above 3, to your point, across all use cases is not just a statistics, right? It's a reflection of real world versatility. In today's market, I think supply chains are under constant pressure to adapt. Businesses are expanding. They're going into new channels, onboarding automation, different type of fulfillment distribution channels, and basically managing an increased complexity of their fulfillment operation. That means that they need a WMS that can perform just as well in a high volume operation, highly automated DC, as well as it does in a smaller operation or a regional facility. What customers value about Made4Net is that they don't have to compromise and they don't have to buy multiple systems. When you look at solutions that are out there, there are ones that specialize in those small facilities, or they're limited to the number of users. Others that are stronger in the L5 industry, just because of the entry level in terms of cost is there. We are flexible, so we are adaptable, and this is where we are different. There's only one system at Made4Net that basically can scale and implement in any one of those level or use cases that partners defines. So whether the customer is running a level 1 operation, which is very, very basic, and just focusing on basic pick, pack, ship, or a level 5 facility with robotics and advanced orchestration, we have consistent functionality, usability, and integration flexibility that is all running on a single platform, highly scalable, and that's what makes us different.
Okay, so let's talk robotics. Intralogistics smart robotic support is called out as a key capability. And coming out of ProMat, it's very clear now that robotics and automation are no longer emerging trends. They're quickly becoming the norm in warehouses and DCs. With that in mind, what opportunities as well as challenges do customers face when they're implementing robotic and material handling in their robotics and material handling in their distribution centers? Greg, what do you think?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Think back many, many years ago, you walked into ProMat and there were half a dozen robotics vendors and it was the new thing. You walk in this year and there's literally hundreds of different vendors selling various types of robotics and material handling. And what we've seen since the day of COVID, reactions from COVID, had a lot of C-suite people going out telling their supply chain leaders to go invest in robotics in case something like this happens again, to replace the human factor. And I think a lot of it was a knee-jerk buy in order to get something in place, assuming we might have something come up like another pandemic. But what we found and what we're working through today still is they're making those purchases based upon no knowledge on what they want the outcome to be, right? So it's very important to define what your business case is and then really follow through on what's the metric of success for implementing either robotics or advanced material handling. If it's simply to replace the human factor, or if in fact you're going to get more distribution throughput, increase productivity, and make your supply chain smoother.
Robots are the epitome of the shiny thing, aren't they? They're just so dazzling and so exciting.
Yep.
Really got to think of this stuff. Howard, opportunities and challenges when it comes to robotics and material handling. What do you have to say on that?
Well, I mean, yeah, Bob, I mean, integration always is going to be a key challenge. We're talking about, you have a warehouse management system. We talked about a warehouse execution system or a control system, right? We talked about how these systems can overlap in terms of functionality. So clearly defining swim lanes where, each system will operate, which functionality they will provide, and how they communicate with each other, I think is key. But, even to expand on that, when it comes to robotics and, like some of the points that Greg just raised, when I started doing this a long time ago, right, when we looked at warehouse automation, we often try to justify it by, maybe a space savings or labor savings. And that has just been upended, right, by COVID, by, right, that, growth in e-commerce orders. So, now what we counsel our clients is to look at, when they're looking at robotics, it's just to understand it's not a magic elixir. And if you walk around ProMat, it in a lot of cases is being pushed that way, right, to solve all your problems. But really focus in on use cases, right? And by use cases, I mean, where does it make sense, in your operation? As Greg mentioned, what are you trying to achieve? So if it is, because it's not a solution, right? It's a tool, right? If it's a e-commerce operation and you're trying to effectively pick those single line orders or 2-line orders, and you're looking at a goods to person solution, it's the goods to person process that's really the solution, and the robotics enables that. So our recommendation is focus in on use cases. If you're just dipping your toe in automation, maybe start out very limited, very defined. Don't go invest in a whole fleet of autonomous mobile robots, the AMRs, day one. Let's, get a few in place. Let's work through all our integration issues. Let's understand how these systems are going to work together. And then let's validate that we're getting the expected results, right? And now we can do a broader rollout. And we also have a better idea of how the integration should work.
Not to mention the future is not necessarily an across-the-board presence of lights-out warehouses where no people are there at all. These have to be decisions made on a case-by-case basis.
Not yet.
Okay, so in today's fast-paced, unpredictable logistics world, the decision to invest in a new WMS can feel like a high-stakes gamble. Economic turbulence, internal uncertainty, and widespread misconceptions about implementation, as we've discussed today, make it easy for companies to press pause, even when they know they need to move forward. So here's the big question. What are the costs of delaying a WMS decision? And how can companies overcome hesitation? Greg, this one for you.
Yeah, I think strategically, and we see it all the time, where we're invited in to help them understand the need for a new WMS. Do they really need one? And I think it really starts with having to build a business case. Why are you considering making this change? Because ultimately, when it gets to a C-level, that C-level person is going to ask the question, can you continue to operate for another couple of years with what you've got today? And if the answer is yes, a simple yes, then that gives the C-level no confidence in spending money to invest in a new WMS. So you have to build a strong business case up front. And meaning you have to understand why it is am I replacing it? Am I end of life for my current solution? Am I not meeting the needs of new requirements that are coming from the government? Do I have a future state purchases that are coming on board for me that my current system cannot support? And then lastly, is my labor such that I don't have enough labor to support what I need my business to do? So building a very strong business case up front is the key essence to defining why I need the WMS, and then that will overcut what that delay is.
But often doing nothing can be a bad decision. I mean, you at least have to undertake this kind of evaluation rather than just sit on your hands and say we can't afford it right now. So very good point. Thank you for that.
It's still amazing how many haven't thought about building the business case. It's just a knee jerk. I need a new WMS just because I think I need one. Yeah.
I mean, for all the fact that you consultants are always harping on this, it's just people need to listen, as opposed to, again, walking through aisles of ProMat and saying, oh, that's a really nice looking robot. I think I'll put that in my warehouse. So great. Yep. Good point to keep emphasizing. Okay. So at this point, I would like to bring the audience in to our audience question and answer portion of our presentation. I've asked and continue to ask audience members to submit their questions by clicking on that Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen, and we will get to as many of your questions as we can, time permitting. Let me start with this one. What is the most effective way to build a strong business case for WMS investment? Here again, picking up on what we talked about, especially for stakeholders who are focused on cost and return on investment. Who wants to go?
I'll take that one. So okay. I'll break it down into 4 key areas. The first one would be identify your pain, understand what it is that you need to fix that's not working well for you, and then define what the key metrics of success for by implementing something that takes away those pains. And then you have to understand what your strategic goals are. Right? What am I going to have to meet or exceed in order to have met my business requirements? And then lastly, have something in place for risk mitigation. What happens if something doesn't go right, if the stars don't align? Because we all know there is a happy path and then there's a non-happy path. Most often the non-happy path is what occurs initially during, for instance, an implementation. So those 4 key areas I think is what should be focused on.
Okay, this questioner is asking, can a company with multiple warehouses that have mixed complexity levels, for instance, so maybe level 2 and level 4 warehouses as part of the same operation, can they use a single WMS platform effectively?
I can take that, Bob.
Okay.
Yeah. So first of all, we see organizations that have different type of facilities with different level of complexity, right? So you could have a main distribution center that you would consider a level 3, a high level 3, or a level 4, and then you have additional satellite storage facilities that you would definitely define as a level 2. The question is, what are the processes within those facilities, and the level of effort you want to put into this. This is where it comes down to, looking at a single WMS that you could implement in both of those level of complexity. So, if you can have a system that is easy enough to configure and fit it into that level 2, at the same time, that same system could be configured to handle different type of workflows, different type of processes in that more complex operation, because that's what you would typically see. That would be a win for you. That would be a win for you because of the inter-process between those warehouses, but also from your resources and your workflows, the data. The adaptability is really where we want to put the focus on, right? The ability to go in and relatively easy implement those smaller facilities or more complex facilities on that same platform. So the answer is definitely yes. You have to find the right system that can support that.
Okay. Questioner, this is a good one. What are the biggest pitfalls during WMS selection and implementation that could derail ROI, and how do you avoid them? Apparently, this questioner thinks that these implementations don't always go completely smoothly as planned. I don't know what they're thinking, but given the case, if reality does intrude, who would like to address that one?
Bob, I'll take that one.
Okay.
You're right. These are rare occurrences, right, where an implementation does not go exactly according to plan. But in the few times that I've seen this occur, right, there are several reasons, right, but there are a couple that I see repeated, and I'm sure Greg and Amit may have, some other examples, but, from my perspective, it's, over designing a system, right? So losing sight of your core functionality needs. This is attempting to try to solve every, corner case, that situation that occurred back in 2002 that, really shut you down for a while. You never want that to occur again. So this is looking at incorporating functionality to manage operations outside of the 4 walls. Why would a WMS ever be doing that? So it's really over designing a system would be one. I think another one is a lack of a well-rounded project team, right? So, when you're attacking this, just remember a WMS has a lot of tentacles, right? It reaches a lot of different parts of an organization. So bringing in a cross-functional team, this is not just an IT project and not just an operations project, but you want, finance involved. You want other areas of your business involved and having a seat at the table and having a say so, because there's a lot you could be missed, as a WMS enables a lot of what they do as well. Next one would be poor design, like your design session, your design workshop. It normally occurs at the very beginning of a project, of an implementation. Not, executing that, as needed. So a poor design workshop. So like I said, this is the initial steps, likely the most critical, right? This is really where you lay the foundation for the system definition. So not having a well thought out workshop, exactly what you want the system to do, how it should work, and validating the vendor, how they're going to design a solution, is another area. And the last one that comes to mind would just be setting unrealistic goals, right? Of course it's going to fail if you set unrealistic goals. If you expect 100% productivity on day one, it's going to fail. I mean, experience tells us that, you're going to be less productive, initially right after go live, right? Before you kind of start to quickly ramp up and realize all those expected productivity gains. So properly setting goals would be that's the last one that comes to mind for me.
I'm going to add one thing to that, and I think we see this all the time. Have your client build out a very detailed RACI matrix, and that's responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. And they're going to find out very quickly that they probably don't have enough people to fill all those seats for the requirements that are going to be needed. So build that RACI out so they understand the time commitments and the level of commitment, and that goes hand in hand with what Howard was saying.
Howard's mention of the need for a team is also important, because isn't it vital that you bring in like the workers on the warehouse floor as early as possible, because you have the change management issue about bringing in a new system. The people who are actually going to be interacting with the system on the floor kind of have to be brought in early so as to assuage any concerns they might have about how it's going to affect their job and their tasks. Don't they have to be kind of in the picture pretty quickly?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
100%.
absolutely. I can tell you numerous examples where, we've taken a look at operations. We've dealt with, the folks on the floor. They have, they'll describe their operations, and we go and we parrot that back to leadership, and there's a total disconnect. Like, yeah, I didn't realize we've been doing that. And in fact, right outside that that door out of this conference room in the warehouse, they've been doing it like that for the last couple of years, but leadership had no idea. So absolutely, soon you can get them involved to get an accurate picture of what your requirements truly are, the better.
Great, thanks for that. Okay, so the questioner says, for companies not yet investing fully in robotics, what should we look for in a WMS to future-proof for eventual automation?
I'll take that one, Bob. So it's a great question, and I actually extend the question to not only robotics, but any type of automation, right? So we need to remember that when you're putting in automation and robotics into a distribution center, into a warehouse, it usually encompasses just one specific area. It's, each solution focuses on one area, one part of the distribution. So the important part here is to look at the overall picture, and the fact that the WMS ultimately needs to manage that area with the robotics and the automation, but not only that area, because we're talking about hybrid of robotics and people. We're talking about different type of Gartner uses a term, if I'm not mistaken, that's called the multi-agent orchestration. You need to be able to manage those specific solutions in an efficient way. Usually the systems that come along with the robotic system are the ones that optimize their performance, optimize their execution on the floor. But when you go one level up, you have many of those, and you need to know as a WMS how to orchestrate all these different type of components, be able to align, adjust, prioritize, and interleave tasks between potentially different type of automation. So the bottom line is that you need to be able to configure your WMS to adjust to different type of automation solutions, deploy those business rules in a way that they can be configurable and adaptable to the future automation that you would potentially bring into the organization.
Interesting question here. How does a consultant help with the WMS selection process? Well, I think we've got some people who are qualified to talk about that without being too promotional about it. Who wants to talk about just what is the role of a consultant in WMS selection?
Yeah, Bob, if I could take that one. I think the first step is clearly identifying, right, future state operations. And I'll go back to something I said about, automation, and I'll say it applies to a WMS as well, right? Right, the software, again, is not the solution, right? It's a tool to enable, right, these benefits you expect, a very powerful tool. right? So it's identifying the future state operations, those best practices, and not just any best practice, but those that apply to you, right? You know, some type of batch picking process or cluster picking process is the best practice, but it also depends on your order profile, right? It needs to fit that for it to make sense for your, and the items you ship for your operations. So it's identifying that future state design based on best practices, based on your specific needs, you know, first thing, right? And then now we get into the WMS selection process. And now it's, you know, okay, now let's document all those future state requirements versus documenting, you know, current processes. You know, you can't just drop a WMS on top of what you're doing today, right? You're just going to enable yourself to do these bad things faster and more efficiently, right? So you want to, you know, again, keep and focus on the future state. And then, you know, we like to, I think, consultant can leverage their experience, you know, working with various vendors as well as market research to identify a vendor pool for a competitive bid process. We always recommend a competitive bid process. And we, you know, and a consultant can go through and manage that process as well. Again, leveraging their experience, you know, with the vendor community to evaluate bid responses, right? Do an apples to apples comparison, shortlist vendors, you know, the whole process, whether it's, you know, setting up vendor demos and structured scripted demos, as well as supporting and managing the process to go visit reference sites, right? I think, you know, what you really gain, if I could just put it in a nutshell, from a consultant, from an experienced consultant that has done this, is not rocket science, right? But typically, you know, for most of our clients, this is a once in a career type of deal, right? Where you're looking at a WMS, we're going to implement a WMS. Whereas for consultants, for us, this is something that we're doing multiple times a year, right? So you know, again, leverage that experience that they have, that insight that they have to help you go throughout this selection process.
Okay, we got a question here requires a pretty quick answer. I want to make sure we stay on time. And it is this: what is the average timeline for a WMS project?
I'll take that. Wow. Huge question. I guess the easy answer would be 6 to 12 months, but don't keep that in mind. What you really have to look at is what is your desired end state and how long do you think it should take to get there? This is a 10 to 15 year decision. So take the time that it's needed in order to implement it effectively. 3 to 4 months to select a vendor, 6 to 12 months to implement it.
Great, thank you. Okay, so unfortunately, we are just about out of time. This has been a great discussion. I wish we had more time to do it. And any questions that the audience had that did not get answered today, I'm sure that our experts would be only too happy to answer them offline. But time for just one final question. I'm going to direct it to all three of you. Here it is. If you could change just one thing about how most companies approach WMS selection or implementation, something that would instantly improve outcomes, what would it be, and why aren't more companies doing it? Start with you, Howard.
Yeah, if I could change one thing, it would be for companies to select and implement a solution, you know, strictly based on utilizing that system as designed to best meet their requirements. Again, this could be a once in a career type of opportunity. So sometimes our clients are eager for the solution, and they may feel like this is their only, you know, opportunity to address every pain point in the operation. So going back to what I said about over designing the system, you know, let's avoid that. Let's resist the temptation to incorporate functionality outside of the four walls. Let's avoid trying to solve every corner scenario that occurs once every couple of years. And really doing that is truly harder than it seems.
Greg, what do you think?
Yeah, so plan for a very detailed design session, blueprint session, where you're talking about configurability from A to Z. And anything that comes out of that deviates from the base solution needs to be documented, an ROI put behind it, and approval from governance at the highest level within the company before you ask the vendor to change the solution.
Amit, last word to you.
Yeah, I'd love for customers to come more prepared to the selection process and knowing what their pain points are. Focus on achieving those goals as part of their selection process. You know, customers, as you talk to vendors, make sure that you identify how those systems can adapt to address not only your current specific needs, but also to support your future growth and expansion.
Well, guys, this has been a great presentation, just really informative and educational, great wisdom on implementation and execution of WMS systems now and in the future. Thank you so much for that. Audience, thank you also for your participation, sitting in, and your great questions. Here's something for you. You can download your copy of what we're talking about here, the Gartner Magic Quadrant for Warehouse Management Systems, and schedule a personal consultation with Made4More experts to review the critical capabilities for WMS report and learn how it applies to your unique operation. There's a couple of QR codes you can take a shot of right now, or if you don't have time in these final few seconds, don't worry about it. This will be provided to all attendees of this presentation when it's over, which unfortunately is right now. Thanks again, guys, everybody, audience, speakers. Have a great day.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.